Everyone thinks Vecna is the final boss of Stranger Things, but what if he's just a pawn? Because there's something in the Upside Down that's been pulling strings since Season 2. Something without a face, without limits, without mercy. The Mind Flayer isn't just another monster. It's the actual threat hiding behind every attack on Hawkins. And once you understand what it really is, Vecna starts to look like a distraction. In this video, I'm breaking down the Mind Flayer's true nature, its origins, its hive mind, and why it's unstoppable. By the end, you'll see why the scariest villain in Stranger Things was never human to begin with. The nature of the Mind Flayer. To understand why the Mind Flayer is so dangerous, we have to strip away the image we see in the show. In Seasons 2 and 3, the Mind Flayer takes the shape of a massive spider-like creature towering over Hawkins, but that spider is not its real body, it is a projection. The Mind Flayer is not a single monster. It is made of countless living particles drifting like ash in the Upside Down. These particles can combine, scatter, and reassemble at will. They are intelligent, they are coordinated, and they function as one mind. This is what makes the Mind Flayer so terrifying. It is not limited to one body that can be destroyed. It is an endless swarm that can reform no matter how much damage it takes. Think about what that means in practice. Every time 11 or the group fights a monster, they are facing a piece of this hive. Kill a Demogorgon, and it is gone. Kill a Demodog, and the battle ends. But with the Mind Flayer, there is no final kill. Every victory is temporary. The particles linger, regroup, and wait for another chance. This also explains its control. The Mind Flayer does not just command from a distance, it invades. In Season 2, it infected Will Byers. Will was not just haunted by visions, he became a host. The particles entered his body, wiring themselves into his nervous system. From there, the Mind Flayer could spy on the group, and even send pain through his body. Unlike Vecna, who needs time to manipulate victims with trauma, the Mind Flayer can take over instantly. And in Season 3, it escalated. The Mind Flayer infected dozens of townspeople. Instead of just controlling them like puppets, it melted them down into raw matter to create a giant physical body. This is not a serial killer like Vecna, who preys on individuals one at a time. This is an organism that can absorb entire groups of people and turn them into extensions of itself. The spider shape we see in Hawkins is only the tip of the iceberg. The true horror of the Mind Flayer is that it is everywhere. It is not a monster in a room. It is a network, a storm, a force of nature, and that is what makes it so much worse than a single villain like Vecna. Its reach across dimensions. If Vecna is the mastermind, then the Mind Flayer is the Empire. To understand why, we have to look at how it operates across the Upside Down in Hawkins. The Upside Down itself is a strange place. It mirrors Hawkins, frozen in time, but with its own twisted biology. The vines, spores, and organic matter all appear to connect to one living system. When characters walk through the Upside Down, they notice how alive it feels. That life is not random, it is tied to the Mind Flayer. Think back to Season 2. When Hopper investigates the tunnels beneath Hawkins, he finds an entire ecosystem growing under the town. Vines pulse like veins, connecting every part of the network. When the group sets the tunnels on fire, Will screams in pain. That is not coincidence. It proves that the Upside Down is wired directly to the Mind Flayer. Hurt the tunnels, and you hurt the hive. This is where its true power begins to show. The Mind Flayer does not just exist in one space, it spreads across dimensions. Through Will, its particles escape into Hawkins. Through hosts like him, it can act on Earth. Through its hive network, it can sense attacks from miles away. Every piece of it is connected. That connection makes it nearly impossible to outsmart. The group might close one gate, but the Mind Flayer feels it. They might win one battle, but the hive adapts. It is always aware, always learning. Vecna might manipulate a single victim's mind, but the Mind Flayer processes everything happening in Hawkins all at once. It is a predator with a massive vision. And then there is the question of distance. In Season 2, the Mind Flayer towers over Hawkins and during Will's visions, but in reality it is not physically there. The shadow we see is a projection, a psychic presence. This is how it haunts without stepping foot on Earth. It can be here and not here at the same time. Season 3 pushed this further. The Mind Flayer created a physical body in Hawkins by melting down hosts, but notice what happens after the body is destroyed in Starcourt. The Mind Flayer does not die. The hive particles remain in the Upside Down, untouched, waiting. The battle is never final because its true self is always safe across the dimension. This layered existence means the Mind Flayer is more than a monster. It is a system. It has roots in the Upside Down, branches in Hawkins, and eyes everywhere. Even when 11 uses her powers against it, she is striking at the victims, not the source. That is why the group's victories feel temporary. They can close doors, they can kill physical shells, but the hive always remains. It is also why Vecna's rise in Season 4 feels connected, but not complete. Vecna can build layers, cast spells, and shape the world of the Upside Down, but he is still working inside the Mind Flayer's territory. The vines, the tunnels, the atmosphere, all of it belongs to the hive mind. Vecna is a general, but the Mind Flayer is the world he operates in. The reach of the Mind Flayer stretches far beyond one villain's schemes. It is a dimension-spanning organism with the patience to wait, the intelligence to adapt, and the resources to rebuild. In other words, you cannot kill it in one battle. You cannot outlast it in one season. Its reach is endless, and that is what makes it unstoppable. The hive mind and control. If there is one word that defines the Mind Flayer, it is control. This creature does not attack in random chaos. It dominates through a hive mind, a system where every part of the organism is linked together, moving in perfect unity. We first see hints of this in Season 2. When the Demodogs attack Hawkins' lab, they do not act like wild animals. They move in formation, circling the building, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. It feels coordinated, almost military. Later, when they suddenly retreat, the reason becomes clear. 11 has closed the gate. The Demodogs are not making choices on their own. They are extensions of the Mind Flayer. That idea becomes even more terrifying when you look at what happens to Will. The particles inside him do more than just spy. They give the Mind Flayer full access to his senses, his voice, even his memories. It can make him act against his own will, like when it forces him to give up the location of the buyer's home. Imagine what that means. The Mind Flayer does not just destroy, it rewires people from the inside out. Season 3 took this to the next level. Instead of relying on one host, the Mind Flayer spread through Hawkins like a plague. Rats ate fertilizer and exploded into fleshy matter. Humans collapsed, only to melt into sludge. Every rat, every human, every drop of melted tissue fused together to build a single giant body. None of these people had independent thought anymore. They had been erased, their identities stripped away, all serving the hive. This is the true terror of the hive mind. The Mind Flayer does not see individuals. It sees resources. A rat is not an animal. It is spare material. A person is not a life. They are biomass. Once infected, they are no longer themselves. They become tools in a larger plan. That larger plan is also why the Mind Flayer is more frightening than Vecna. Vecna kills individuals with a gruesome pattern. He feeds on trauma, he torments, and he leaves a trail of bodies. But the Mind Flayer is not interested in one victim at a time. It is interested in domination. It will consume an entire population if it means expanding the hive. The hive mind also explains why it seems to know everything happening in Hawkins at once. When the tunnels are burned, it reacts instantly. When hosts are taken, it senses their surroundings. It does not need agents or scouts. Every infected creature is already part of its nervous system. Information flows like electricity across the hive. And here is where we stop and think. Imagine being in Hawkins, where any neighbor, animal, or even your own family member could already belong to the hive. The threat is not just a monster outside your window. The threat is inside your community, living in your home, waiting to dissolve into sludge at the Mind Flayer's command. That is what makes this enemy so terrifying. Vecna is a man with powers. The Mind Flayer is not a man at all. It is a network, a system, a colony, and it sees Hawkins not as a town, but as raw material for conquest. If you are enjoying this breakdown and want to see more deep dives into Stranger Things like this one, make sure you hit subscribe. We are only just scratching the surface of how dangerous the Mind Flayer really is, and you will not want to miss what comes next. Possession and psychological horror. The Mind Flayer is terrifying not only because it can control bodies, but because of what that control does to the people trapped inside. Possession is one of the scariest tools in its arsenal. Unlike a Demogorgon, which kills you outright, the Mind Flayer traps you inside your own mind while using your body as a puppet. We see this most clearly in Will Byers. In Season 2, after escaping the Upside Down, Will begins to sense something following him. He calls it a shadow, but the truth is much worse. The Mind Flayer has already marked him. When the particles enter his body, Will becomes a host, but he does not vanish like the people in Season 3. He remains conscious, caught between himself and the hive mind. That conflict is what makes these scenes so chilling. When Will tries to resist, the Mind Flayer overpowers him. When the military fights back, Will screams as if the attacks are hitting him directly. The Mind Flayer uses his body against him, forcing him to betray soldiers, trapping him in visions of its storm, even using him as a spy on Hawkins. This is horror on a different level. It is not a monster outside the window. It is a monster in your veins, stealing your voice and turning you back into a weapon against your own friends. Season 3 shows another side of this with Billy Hargrove. Unlike Will, Billy is fully consumed. The Mind Flayer manipulates his mind by showing him visions, then strips away his control. Billy becomes its weapon, luring victims to their deaths and spreading the infection across Hawkins. But the most unsettling part is how the show frames his possession. Billy is still in there, buried deep, aware of what is happening but powerless to stop it. In his final moments, he briefly breaks through, proving he was conscious the entire time. That detail changes everything. The Mind Flayer does not erase people instantly. It buries them alive inside their own minds. Victims remain trapped, aware, and suffering while their bodies act out the Hive's orders. That is far crueler than anything Vecna does. Vecna preys on trauma and kills his victims in gruesome fashion, but their deaths are final. With the Mind Flayer, death is not the worst outcome. The worst outcome is possession, being turned into a living prison, watching your body betray the people you care about. This is also why the Mind Flayer feels so invasive. It does not just attack your body, it violates your identity. It takes your memories, your voice, your very self, and uses them as weapons. It is the ultimate corruption, turning friends and family into enemies without warning. And when you expand that idea across an entire town, it becomes even more terrifying. If Will and Billy can be possessed, then anyone can. No one is safe. Hawkins is not just under attack from the outside, it is rotting from within, infecting one person at a time. Possession is where Stranger Things shifts from science fiction into psychological horror. The Mind Flayer is not a monster you can see and shoot. It is an invader of identity. It transforms people into soldiers while leaving them trapped inside their own minds. And that is a fate far worse than death. The Star Court battle and its lessons. Season 3 gave us one of the biggest battles in Stranger Things, and at the center of it was the Mind Flayer's most ambitious plan yet. By melting down dozens of hosts into raw biomass, it created a towering monster to fight the group head-on. This was not just another Demogorgon or Demodog, it was the Mind Flayer testing how far it could push its influence into Hawkins. The Star Court creature was massive, brutal, and nearly unstoppable. It could smash through walls, tear apart forests, and shrug off fireworks. But its strength was not just physical. Every strike it made was fueled by the people it had consumed. When you look at it closely, you realize the monster is not only made of bodies, but of identities. Every scream inside its flesh is a reminder of the lives it erased to build itself. This is what separates the Mind Flayer from Vecna. Vecna's attacks leave scars, but they are individual. The Mind Flayer erases entire groups and builds weapons out of them. By the time the group fights it in the mall, they are not just battling a monster, they are battling people from their own town, melted and reshaped into a single organism. The Star Court fight also taught us something critical about how the Mind Flayer operates. Its body in Hawkins was powerful, but it was not the true Mind Flayer. It was only an extension. And when Joyce closes the gate in the final moments and sacrifices Hopper, the monster falls. But the Hive itself remains untouched. The particles in the Upside Down are still alive. The victory is local, not final. That lesson is important. No matter how big or intimidating the physical bodies look, they are only temporary shells. Destroying them does not kill the Hive, it only slows it down. The real Mind Flayer is untouchable, waiting in the Upside Down, ready to send another piece across the gate. The Star Court battle also revealed how personal the Mind Flayer's control can be. It used Billy as its puppet, but Billy's final act of defiance showed that even the Hive mind is not perfect. Somewhere deep inside, human will can break through. That moment gave the group hope, but it also showed how cruel the Mind Flayer is. It leaves people conscious inside their prisons, forcing them to witness everything they do while under its control. Another key detail from the Star Court battle is how the Mind Flayer adapts. In Season 2, it relied on the tunnels. When that failed, it built a body from flesh. It does not repeat mistakes. It evolves. Each attempt is more aggressive, more destructive, and more efficient than the last. That means by the time we reach Season 5, it will not simply copy its old strategies. It will escalate again. The fight at Star Court was a turning point for the story, but it was not the end of the threat. If anything, it proved how patient and calculated the Mind Flayer is. It can afford to lose battles because it never risks its true self. Every defeat is only a delay. Every setback is a lesson, and that is what makes it so dangerous. Vecna nearly broke Hawkins in Season 4, but when you compare him to the Mind Flayer, the difference is clear. Vecna is a villain who can be fought and beaten face to face. The Mind Flayer is something else entirely. It is a hive mind that learns, adapts, and always survives. Vecna's role in the Mind Flayer's plan. Season 4 introduced Vecna as the face of the Upside Down, but when you look closely, his role is not as independent as it first seems. Henry Creel, also known as One, became Vecna after 11 banished him into the Upside Down. Once there, he stumbled into the Mind Flayer. What happened next is the key to understanding their connection. The show makes it clear that Vecna shaped the Upside Down into his own vision. He spread the vines across Hawkins and used his powers to impose order on the dimension. But the Mind Flayer was already there. The ash particles, the hive network, the storm, we'll saw in Season 2. All of that existed long before Henry arrived. Vecna did not create the hive, he discovered it. In one flashback, we see Henry reaching out to the swirling particles. They gather before him, forming into the spider shape he always admired. That moment suggests something crucial. Vecna did not invent the Mind Flayer. He shaped it into a form he could understand, and from then on, he became its general. This raises an important question. Who is really in charge? On the surface, Vecna seems like the mastermind. He has a human voice, he delivers long speeches, and he manipulates individual victims. But the Mind Flayer is bigger than speeches. It is a hive that spreads across dimensions, far older and far more vast than Henry Creel. The most logical way to see their relationship is this. Vecna is the tactician, but the Mind Flayer is the empire he serves. There is evidence for this in how their powers work together. Vecna feeds on trauma, using psychic visions to break people before killing them. The Mind Flayer feeds on mass control, spreading across hosts and building physical bodies. One is psychological, the other biological. Together they cover both fronts. Vecna softens victims with terror, and the Mind Flayer consumes them on a massive scale. This also explains why Vecna did not appear until Season 4. The Mind Flayer had already made multiple attempts to conquer Hawkins, first through Will, then through the Starcourt monster. Both failed. Bringing Vecna into the plan added a new layer. The hive needed a human mind to guide it, someone who could plan, manipulate, and strike with precision. Henry Creel became that mind. But here's the twist. If the Mind Flayer needed Vecna, it also means Vecna needs the Mind Flayer. Without the hive, Henry would be a man with powers stuck in a dead dimension. The hive mind gives him scale. It gives him armies. It gives him the storm and the vines that make him look like a god. Vecna is dangerous on his own, but with the Mind Flayer, he becomes apocalyptic. When we look towards Season 5, this balance becomes crucial. Fans might see Vecna as the main villain, but in reality he is only half of the equation. Defeating him will not stop the hive. Destroying his lair will not end the Upside Down. Vecna is the face, but the Mind Flayer is the body, and as long as the body lives, the threat will return. This makes Vecna's role almost tragic. He believes he is the master of the Upside Down, but the truth may be the opposite. He is a servant to a larger force, a human general fighting for a hive mind that does not care about him. In the end, the Mind Flayer's patience and scale make it the true enemy, and Vecna is only its chosen weapon. The Mind Flayer's origins and dimension. To understand why the Mind Flayer is worse than Vecna, we have to look at where it came from. Season 4 hinted that the Upside Down is not a natural world. It is frozen in 1983, copying Hawkins but covered in vines. That raises the question, if this world is not natural, then what is powering it? The clearest clues come from Stranger Things. The First Shadow, the official stage play set in Hawkins before the events of the show. In that story, we see glimpses of Dimension X, a place beyond the Upside Down. It is a realm of shifting landscapes, storms, and strange entities. One of those entities appears to be the source of the Mind Flayer. Dimension X is different from the Upside Down, where the Upside Down mirrors. Hawkins' Dimension X feels alien. Its skies churn with energy, its environment shifts constantly, and most importantly, it seems to be alive. This system suggests that the Mind Flayer is not a new creation, but an ancient intelligence. It may have existed long before Hawkins, long before Henry Creel, watching and waiting in Dimension X. When 11 opened the gate, it did not just release monsters. She may have given the Mind Flayer its first chance to expand into our world. Henry's encounter with the particles in Season 4 takes on new meaning in this light. He did not invent the Mind Flayer. He found it. He touched the Mind Flayer and shaped it into a form that matched his obsession with spiders. What he calls the Mind Flayer might only be one mask of a much older force. This also explains why the hive seems endless. In Seasons 2 and 3, no matter how many times the group fought back, the particles kept returning. If they are being funneled from the Dimension X, then the supply is infinite. Closing one gate slows the flow, but it does not stop it. The source is still open, still alive, and still waiting for another opportunity. The mythology also lines up with how the Upside Down behaves. The vines and tunnels act like veins, spreading across Hawkins, as if the town itself is becoming part of a larger body. That body may be a fragment of Dimension X leaking into Earth. Hawkins is not just invaded. It is being transformed into an extension of the hive mind. If this is true, then the Mind Flayer is not simply a monster from another world. It is the ambassador of a living dimension. It does not conquer because it is cruel. It conquers because it is its nature. Just as fire spreads or vines grow, the hive expands. That makes it different from Vecna, whose motives are human and personal. The Mind Flayer's motives are impersonal, vast, and inevitable, and that inevitability is what makes it worse. Vecna can be killed because he is human. He has a beginning and an end, but the Mind Flayer is tied to Dimension X. And as long as that realm exists, so does the hive mind. You cannot destroy an ecosystem by killing one predator. You would have to cut off the entire dimension. The origins of the Mind Flayer remind us that Stranger Things is not just about one villain with psychic powers. It is about humanity colliding with something much older and much larger than itself. Vecna might be the most recognizable face of the Upside Down, but the Mind Flayer is the reason the Upside Down exists at all. The true scale of the threat. To really see why the Mind Flayer is worse than you think, we need to step back and measure the scale of its threat. Stranger Things has always escalated its villains. Season 1 gave us the Demogorgon, a single monster. Season 2 introduced the Mind Flayer, showing us that the Demogorgon was only a pawn. Season 3 revealed its ability to manipulate flesh and create the Spider Monster. Season 4 shifted focus to Vecna, but the Mind Flayer's shadow still hung over the story. Scale is where the Mind Flayer stands apart. Vecna is terrifying, but his danger is measured in individuals. He chooses victims one by one, luring them into visions before breaking them apart. His ritual is gruesome, but it is also limited. He cannot kill thousands of people at once. He is not designed to wage mass destruction in real time. The Mind Flayer, by contrast, operates on a collective scale. In Season 2, it does not just torment Will. It uses him as a conduit to spy on the group and to influence events in Hawkins. Every moment Will spends infected shows us the true scope of the hive mind's control. He feels cold when the Mind Flayer draws near. He sees visions of tunnels spreading under the town. His body reacts with seizures when the tunnels are burned. It is not just possession. It is complete integration with the network. Season 3 raises that scale even higher. The Mind Flayer does not stalk victims. It absorbs them. Rats explode into piles of flesh. People collapse into goo, then reform into the Spider Monster. Entire groups of townspeople are turned into raw material for one single organism. This is not horror in the sense of a haunted house. It is biological colonization, the replacement of human life with a new species. Think about what that means in the long term. Vecna can break bones. The Mind Flayer can wipe out entire towns in days, turning every living creature into fuel. That is not an isolated serial killer. That is an extinction-level process. Even more terrifying is the hive's coordination. When one part of the network is harmed, the whole system reacts. Burn the tunnels under Hawkins, and Will feels it. Attack the Spider Monster, and the entire hive mind flinches. This suggests that the Mind Flayer does not fight battle by battle. It fights as one organism stretched across the countless bodies. That makes it nearly impossible to corner. You can injure it, but unless you cut off the source, it regenerates. Compare that to Vecna's reliance on ritual and planning. His power works in stages. He identifies a target, infiltrates their mind, then strikes. The Mind Flayer has no such limitations. It does not care who you are. It does not need to know your trauma. Once it has access, you are either assimilated or destroyed. The scale also matters for strategy. Vecna is a commander. He plots, schemes, and manipulates. The Mind Flayer is not a single mind in the same way. It is an environment, a system, a force of nature with awareness. It does not stop to bargain. It does not hesitate. It spreads because that is what it does. This makes the Mind Flayer fundamentally more dangerous than Vecna. You can predict Vecna's next move because he thinks like a person. You cannot predict the Mind Flayer's spread because it follows the logic of biology and invasion. Its scale is beyond human reasoning, which makes it harder to anticipate and harder to stop. When you add up all these factors, you realize the Mind Flayer is not simply a monster in Hawkins. It's a global threat waiting to break loose. Vecna might want to reshape Hawkins. The Mind Flayer wants to consume the world. The Mind Flayer's hidden strategy. The Mind Flayer is unlike any other threat that the characters have faced in Stranger Things. While the Demogorgons were brutal and the Demodogs were overwhelming in numbers, the Mind Flayer has always stood apart because it operates with strategy. It does not act for survival like an animal. It does not attack out of instinct. Each move is calculated. Each step is chosen with a larger purpose in mind. This is clearest in its decision to use Vecna as a vessel. That choice was not random. Vecna offered something the Mind Flayer could not create on its own: human cruelty. Henry Creel's hatred of the world existed before the Upside Down ever touched him. Even before his transformation, he was already set apart by his violence, his bitterness, and his obsession with control. The Mind Flayer did not invent that darkness, but it saw how to use it. The cold truth is that Vecna is expendable. He is powerful, yes, but if he falls, the Mind Flayer can find another host, another weapon, another mask. Its patience and careful design make it almost untouchable. Even after 11 closed the gate in Season 2, the Mind Flayer endured. Even after Billy's sacrifice in Season 3, the Mind Flayer endured. Even after Vecna was blasted through a window in Season 4, the Mind Flayer endured. None of these moments touched the root. That is why the Mind Flayer is the true villain of Stranger Things. It cannot be baited into a fight. It cannot be tricked into making rash decisions. It allows others to bleed while it waits for the right moment. In doing so, it keeps its core safe. Unless the heroes find a way to attack that core, Vecna's defeat will not end the story. The Mind Flayer will continue to grow, to spread, and to shape the world in its image. Outro. Every battle in Hawkins has been a symptom. The Mind Flayer is the disease. Vecna may be the face of the war, but the true enemy is the intelligence that stands behind him. Until the Mind Flayer is destroyed, the fight will never be over. Thanks for watching. If you want more Stranger Things deep dives like this, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next breakdown.